There's a book that came out recently that is totally up your alley.
That's right. Obviously, I grew up listening to hip hop. I also grew up reading comic books. I was huge into Marvel Comics all through the 90s. So there's a new book out that shows a sort of partnership that Marvel has done with the universe of hip hop. Over the last few years, since 2015, they've created a series of crossover variant comic book covers, usually for #1s and reboots, where they took famous hip hop album covers, such as Dr. Dre's The Chronic, and they made a remix, like Doctor Strange's The Mystic.
You want to flip through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
I can also do that if you want to talk.
This book's really interesting. That's Diggable Planets, Blowout Comb, which they did Blowout Claw for. There's like little nods and puns. That's Tikal, Method Man. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff in here. The thing that this book is missing is that I don't think they got the rights to there's Big Pun, the original comic books. So, I mean, the original hip-hop album covers. So you see the comic book covers, you see the sketches that inspired them, but you don't see the actual hip-hop covers that made them what they are. There's like Nas as Miles, you know, the Illmatic album cover is one of my favorite. There's Tyler, the Creator. There's so many here. Mobb Deep. Some of my favorite rappers of all time are all represented in this book, but they aren't named specifically. I'm a huge Wu-Tang fan, as you can see right here. So I flipped through this book and I said, you know, one thing that I can do here at IGN is sort of as a service, put together some of my favorite Wu-Tang album covers that were also became the inspiration for covers in this book. Since this book won't show you them, I figured I would. So real quick, WuTang Clan is a group of 9, then 8, sometimes 10, sometimes 40.
They're like a superhero group.
Yeah, rappers from Staten Island who all got together in the 90s to make a little album called Enter the Wu-Tang, aka the 36 Chambers. They all take turns rapping. Riz is the producer, but he also raps. They've been putting out records forever. Most recently, they put out one just 2 weeks ago. But they've always been sort of weirdly like had one foot in nerd culture. And I think that's what kind of grabbed me when I was a kid, was sort of saying like, these guys like comic books and they like video games. There was a Wu-Tang video game.
Well,
I've got the controller
I love
right
that
here.
Their name came from old kung fu movies.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, yeah, they're very not so secretly huge nerds.
Yeah,
too,
they're like
so.
they're thugged out like drug dealers that will break your legs, but also like they'll catch a kung fu flick at the in Times Square and buy some comic books. So real quick. Wu-Tang and comic books have always been sort of intertwined. If we want to take a look real quick here, Iron Man is the name of a Ghostface Killah album cover because Iron Man was one of his code names. And he's been sort of sampling Doctor Doom for a very long time and been a big fan of that whole era. Liquid Swords looks like a comic book. That's Jizz's first album, came out in '94. We got Wu Massacre, which actually had 3 alternate covers, which is about as comic book as you can get. That came out just a few years ago. And then Wu-Tang actually had a dedicated comic book series called The 9 Rings of Wu-Tang, where all of the characters are represented in these like kind of crazy comic book forms. Wizard helped in conjunction with Image to put that out. And just recently, the saga continues. Their most newest album, The Corner, produced entirely by DJ Mathematics, is once again comic book inspired. So to cross back to Marvel, let's take a look at some of the stuff that Marvel has done inspired by Wu-Tang, starting from the beginning. Obviously, Enter the Wu-Tang. This is the first one. This is Squadron Supreme. Came out in 2015. They're #1. Based entirely on this album cover. This is such a weird album cover to me because this was the first time any of us had ever heard of Wu-Tang. We'd never seen or heard anything this grimy in terms of New York City hip hop. And seeing this, these 9 guys who aren't even all on the cover, some of them are actually extras because they didn't show up. There's like the photographer and like DJ, yeah, people in the back,
I love that.
Artists. They're wearing masks.
They got like the Wu-Tang symbol in the background too.
There's like, I guess they put a box fan on and blew all these candles across the room. It's so mysterious and so cool, but there's something just so triumphantly kung fu about it. And so there we see the remix of that with the Squadron Supreme logo made to look like the Wu-Tang logo. So I really dig that. Moving on, we've also got Tikal. Now, Tikal is one of the first rappers from Wu-Tang to put out his own solo album. This came out in '94. Again, blew our ears open because we had never heard anything like this. And so Red Wolf, who is a character I'm not really familiar with, they did a cover for him, again in 2015. So that's what these two look side by side. Yeah. Really big fan of that.
It seems like a huge missed opportunity that this book didn't have those things back to back.
Yeah,
you know?
So I don't really know where that disconnect is.
I think it just comes down to like licensing issues.
Exactly.
And probably a billion different record labels who all want a cut of it, and you can't afford to do that. So here we are doing it for you.
Yep, for sure. This is Liquid Swords, Jizz's first album cover, one of the grimiest hip hop albums ever made. It's also
that rules.
I love this. I actually have a Liquid Liquid Sword shirt. I wear it on camera every now and then, and just like there's a couple random dudes in the comments being like, "Yo, I see you, dude." This is awesome. Again, I really like the way they handle some of the logo work. It's so cool to see Iron Man in this shot, in this pose, on the giant chess table. Again, Wu-Tanger, they're really big nerds. They're really into chess. They reference chess a lot in their raps, so that's so cool. So yeah, Contest of Champions again, 2015. ODB,
this is so good.
Rest in peace. Howard the Duck, rest in peace for a very long time until Guardians of the Galaxy brought him back in a post-credit stinger scene. This is awesome. I remember seeing this back in the day. This is such a cool album cover because it's his actual ID that they just kind of like messed with.
Also the feathers and the dreads, just like that's such a perfect.
Yep. Turns out there's no Brooklyn Zoo. There's a zoo in the Bronx, which is really funny. But yeah, this is great. So moving on from there, we've got Raekwon and Ghostface on Only Built for Cuban Linx. This is one of the first duo albums they put out, even though Raekwon sort of took front and center. And over here we've got the Hulk taking front and center in the same exact style. And instead of Only Built for Cuban Linx, it says The Totally Awesome, which I really dig. From here, Gravediggers. A lot of people don't consider them Wu-Tang. They're entirely produced by RZA. I call them sort of like Wu-Tang cousins. 6 Feet Deep is awesome. It's one of my favorite records of all time. No one's ever heard of it. It's on Spotify. Go download it. Go listen to it. This is a menacing photo composition-wise. Terrifying. These guys aren't really around. One of them passed away a few years ago. But RZA raps on this album a lot over his own beats, which is about as Wu-Tang as it gets. And here we have the Howling Commandos of S.H.I.E.L.D. Which are like... They went a little...
I know Marvel, okay? That's like Man-Thing in the front, and then...
Well, also they went with this really weird, like...
Is that Hitmonkey?
Ralph Steadman art.
Yeah, I don't know who they got for that.
So weird.
It's really strange.
But I love it, you know? And it's the kind of thing that if I saw this out of the corner of my eye, I'd be like, is that Gravediggers inspired? But most people would just be like, that's a cool cover.
I kind of want to see like Marvel do this with like heavy metal covers now,
yeah,
too. You know?
Totally.
Let's see what else we got.
And then we've got Iron Flag, which came out in 2001. One of their less interesting album covers, but I think they handled it well for Champions Volume 2, number 1. Now again, these are all variant covers. The originals also exist, but this was a nice nod they did. It kind of started with Run the Jewels connecting the dots with Marvel. So that's really cool. So yeah, that's just a brief history of 7 awesome times Wu-Tang and Marvel have crossed over in the last few years, side by side, and some brief history of Wu-Tang and comic books. Yeah. I will do everything I can to shoehorn Wu-Tang into this show.
Yeah, and if you if you know your rap album covers, then just grab the collection and I guess figure it out. It's kind of like a weird visual puzzle at that point.
If you love comic books, you'll love these Thor toys we unboxed. Thor Ragnarok is awesome, and the toys are just as cool. And if you like terrifying, aggressive sounds, like the ones the RZA makes, you'll love the ones coming from space!